What if the most dangerous form of imprisonment in modern America is completely invisible? Not the walls of a prison cell, but the tiny mental frame you use to interpret everything around you. Every morning, millions of people wake up already exhausted, not from what they've done, but from the weight of their own perspective. They sit in their cars, stuck in traffic, thinking that life is unfair, scroll for hours on social media, convinced that everyone else is doing better, and slowly begin to believe that this feeling of being lost is just part of being an adult. The truth is terrifying. You can spend your entire life trapped inside a mental maze that you created without even noticing. And the longer you stay there, the more it begins to feel like the only possible reality. Welcome to the Stoic Lighthouse, guiding modern minds with ancient wisdom. If you want to break free from this illusion and finally build a stronger mindset, hit the like button and subscribe right now, because the knowledge you're about to learn might be the exact perspective shift that turns your entire life around. According to Marcus Aurelius, the things we perceive are not always the problem. What truly harms us is the way we choose to look at them. Ryan Holiday reminds us that the obstacle is not only the way, it's also the lesson your mind refuses to learn. So let me ask you directly, how long have you been reacting to ordinary situations as if they were unbearable tragedies? Simply because your perspective has never been challenged. Because until you expand the way you see the world, nothing around you will actually change. And this is exactly what we are about to explore. Number 1. The ego's magnifying glass. Why do our problems look so massive? Most people believe their problems are enormous because the world has become more chaotic and unstable. But the uncomfortable truth is that our ego secretly amplifies everything, turning simple events into emotional catastrophes just to preserve its own importance. The ego is like a camera that only zooms in on what threatens it and completely ignores the bigger picture. So a small comment from a coworker sounds like a deep personal insult. A minor financial setback suddenly feels like a collapse of your entire future. A moment of anxiety becomes a sign that you're permanently broken. This isn't the world attacking you. It's your ego manipulating the scale of the problem so that it can justify its reactions. Seneca warned, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." William Birvine explains that when you convince yourself that everything is urgent, you lose the capacity to see what actually matters. When you live inside this mental state, you start to confuse emotional intensity with truth. If it hurts a lot, then it must be serious. If it triggers fear, then it must be dangerous. But Stoicism teaches that intensity does not equal importance. A small, insignificant event can generate intense emotions if the ego feels attacked. And the opposite is also true. You can face a real challenge with calm and clarity if the ego is silent. Chrysippus used to say that philosophy forces us to look at events from a neutral point of view before we decide how to feel, because most of the pain we experience isn't caused by facts, but by the distorted lens we use to look at those facts. According to Chrysippus, reason allows us to look at events without exaggeration and respond only to what is necessary. Look at your own past week. How many moments did you spend suffering over something that, one day later, already felt irrelevant? How many times did you tell yourself, "This is unbearable," only to realize you survived and barely remember it now? That's the ego playing with your mind. And the first rule in Stoic practice is to expose this illusion. When you feel something growing uncontrollably in your head, ask yourself, is this really that big? Or am I making it big because I want to feel like the protagonist of a tragedy? Once you remove the magnifying glass, the image doesn't disappear, but it finally returns to its real size, and only then you can actually deal with it. Number 2, Marcus Aurelius's breakthrough. What does the view from above really mean? The concept of the view from above is often misunderstood as a poetic metaphor, But for the Stoics, it was a practical mental exercise designed to completely rewire the way you perceive reality. Marcus Aurelius developed this technique during some of the darkest periods of his life. Plagues spreading through the Roman Empire, military conflicts on the borders, betrayal from inside his own inner circle. Instead of collapsing under the pressure, he stepped back and trained his mind to look at life as if observing it from a much higher altitude. Why? Because when you zoom out, individual problems lose their emotional grip. They become small parts of a much bigger system, and this instantly weakens the power they have over you. According to Marcus Aurelius, you can remain undisturbed if you rise above and see everything from a higher vantage point. Naval Ravikant often explains that modern people suffer not because life is hard, but because they never step back far enough to get perspective. The mind becomes obsessed with the tiniest details, a number on a bank account, a rude message, a temporary inconvenience, and forgets that in the grand structure of the universe, these moments are just microscopic dots. When you apply the view from above, you're not denying reality. You're reassigning it to its correct proportion. Chrysippus used to say that the human being becomes wiser as soon as he realizes that he is just one link in a much larger cosmic chain. And this idea is fundamental to the exercise. From a higher point of view, every individual problem becomes just a small wave in a vast ocean of events. Once you see that, you don't panic, you position yourself. Chrysippus reminded us, the order of the universe remains, even when our personal circumstances change. Now imagine yourself rising above the city you live in, seeing the streets, the cars, the buildings, and realizing how tiny everything actually is. Then rise even higher, visualizing the entire country, the clouds, the curvature of the earth. Keep going until your mind leaves the planet and sees the earth as a small blue dot spinning in a silent and endless cosmos. In that moment, your most intense worries become almost invisible, not because they are meaningless, but because your mind has finally found the right distance to look at them. That is the essence of the view from above, and once you learn how to use it, even the heaviest day loses its power to crush you. Number 3, the universe as your mentor, physics and logic behind the technique. To understand why the view from above is so powerful, you need to go deeper than the metaphor. The Stoics weren't just offering a visualization, they were grounding it in the very structure of the universe. Marcus Aurelius, Zeno, and Chrysippus believed that the cosmos operates according to a rational order. Nothing in nature exists in isolation. Every event is part of a larger chain of cause and effect. That's why, for them, stepping back and observing life at a distance was not simply a coping mechanism. It was a direct way to align your mind with the logic of nature. Zeno taught that a human being fulfills its purpose when it understands how its small role is connected to the order of the whole. Modern thinkers like Massimo Pigliucci reinforce the same idea. He explains that when you zoom out and place yourself in a wider structure, you're not running away from your problems. You're putting them back into the physical and logical context they belong to. Imagine staring at a single pixel on a screen. It might look ugly, confusing, or even meaningless. But once you zoom out and see the entire image, that pixel has a function. It fits into something bigger. The Stoics believed that the universe works the same way, and that anxiety often comes from staring at a single pixel for too long. According to Massimo Pigliucci, perspective is not about ignoring reality, but seeing it through the lens of reason instead of emotion. This mindset turns the universe into an active mentor. Every situation, even the painful ones, becomes a lesson within a rational system. A setback is no longer bad luck. It's a necessary consequence of a much larger chain unfolding. A moment of humiliation is no longer a personal defeat. but part of your training in humility and resilience. When you start thinking like this, you stop resisting life and begin cooperating with it. That is why the Stoics insisted so much on physics and logic as the foundation for emotional strength. Because once you understand the order of the whole, the chaos of the individual moment loses its power. So when you practice the view from above, don't just imagine distance. Remember that you are aligning your mind to the natural order of the cosmos. And once your thinking is aligned with that order, even the most painful event starts to make sense. Number 4. The practical blueprint. How to apply the view from above in 4 clear steps. Step 1. Break the emotional loop. Before you can rise above a situation, you must interrupt the emotional feedback loop happening in your mind. When a problem strikes, your brain quickly creates a narrative. This always happens to me, nothing ever works. That narrative feeds emotion, and the emotion feeds the narrative. The first Stoic move is to recognize that you're inside this loop. Pause, breathe. Label the feeling anger, insecurity, fear. This conscious act already reduces the intensity by forcing your rational mind to take control. According to Marcus Aurelius, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Step 2. Shift to the observer position. After interrupting the emotional loop, imagine stepping outside of yourself as if watching a scene from above. You are no longer the main character. You are the observer. Naval Ravikant says this mental shift gives you a painful but liberating insight. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who sees the thoughts. Look at the event as if it was happening to a stranger. What would you tell them? Would it still feel overwhelming? Or just like a normal challenge of life? Naval Ravikant reminds us, suffering is the moment when we allow ourselves to identify with the mind. Step 3. Expand the frame in space and time. Now expand the frame spatially. Imagine zooming out of the room, the building, the city, the country, until you see the earth from above. Then expand it in time. Ask yourself, will this matter in 1 year? In 5 years? The Stoics believed that remembering the scale of the universe instantly corrects the ego's distortions. Chrysippus used to say that wisdom is the ability to recognize your small place in the cosmic order. Not to feel insignificant, but to act with proportion and clarity. Chrysippus explained, right judgment begins by placing each event in the structure of the whole. Step 4. Return and act with precision. Once the perspective is expanded, you must return to the present moment, but now with a corrected perception. The view from above is not an escape from reality, it's a recalibration. Modern Stoic Sharon Lebel says that after restoring proportion, you must come back and act precisely on what is within your control. Instead of reacting emotionally to everything, you focus on the specific action that actually improves the situation. That is how perspective turns into power. According to Sharon Lebel, a true Stoic does not abandon the world, he simply refuses to respond to it with ignorance. Number 5. The horizontal perspective, expanding your vision through time, not just space. Most people embrace the idea of zooming out in space, imagining themselves above their city or even beyond the planet. But they forget a crucial dimension: time. The Stoics believed that a change in perspective is incomplete if you don't expand your vision horizontally across the timeline of your life. Living only in the present moment without considering the long-term consequences is one of the main reasons modern Americans fall into cycles of stress, regret, and frustration. Today's world constantly pushes you to react immediately. A breaking news alert, a text message, a social media post. Every moment feels urgent. Every decision feels final. But when you stretch your mental frame into the future, you start seeing how temporary and insignificant most of those daily irritations really are. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, all is fleeting, and in time you will not even remember the things that seem so unbearable now. In practical terms, This means visualizing not only where you are, but when you are in relation to the rest of your life. Imagine yourself 5 years from now. Will the rude comment from that co-worker still define how you see yourself? Will that disappointing meeting still have any impact on the person you've become? When you look at it from that future perspective, it becomes obvious that most of what upsets you today has no real weight in the broader structure of your existence. William Birvine explains that this horizontal view frees you from impulsive decisions because it forces your mind to prioritize what actually has long-term value instead of what merely produces an immediate emotional reaction. And that is exactly how the Stoics trained themselves to remain calm in hostile environments, not by suppressing emotion, but by placing every event within the natural flow of time. According to William Birvine, the more you expand your time horizon, the less power temporary discomfort has over you. When you combine the view from above with the horizontal perspective, something remarkable happens. Your ego loses its ability to exaggerate events, and your mind starts acting like a strategist instead of a victim. Problems no longer dominate you, they become data. You evaluate, you respond, and you move on. Number 6, the fruits of cosmic perspective, much more than inner calm. Many people assume that Stoicism is simply a tool to remain calm and emotionally detached, but that is a shallow and incomplete interpretation. The true purpose of expanding your perspective is to unlock a completely different level of mental performance. The moment you remove the ego's magnifying glass and step back from your narrow point of view, you're not escaping from reality. You're accessing a higher mode of thinking. Marcus Aurelius wasn't seeking peace just to feel better. He was seeking clarity to make better decisions in times of crisis, to remain useful to the people under his command, and to act in line with his values, even in the face of chaos. Marcus Aurelius said, "Rise above your troubles, not to forget them, but to understand how to act rightly in spite of them." When you achieve this kind of perspective, you don't become passive. You become strategically active. You begin to recognize which emotions deserve energy and which are simply noise. You no longer react impulsively to comments on social media, political headlines, or workplace frustration. Instead, you reserve your strength for the things that actually build a meaningful life. John Sellers explains that Stoicism is less about suppressing emotion and more about channeling it toward intentional action. The expanded perspective acts like a filter. It removes the unnecessary and highlights what really matters. According to John Sellers, a correct view of one's place in the world allows emotion to become a servant of virtue, not its enemy. Chrysippus believed that the highest form of wisdom is the ability to respond to events according to their true nature. Someone insults you. It's just a sound made by another human, not a threat to your identity. You fail at something important? It's information, not condemnation. You suffer a setback? It's part of the universal chain of events and can be used as fuel if approached correctly. Modern philosopher Kevin Vost expands this idea by saying that a Stoic doesn't seek peace for the sake of comfort. He seeks it as a platform for purposeful action. Once the emotion stabilizes, you gain the mental space necessary to create, to lead, and to serve others. You become less obsessed with how you feel and more interested in what you can do to improve your life and the lives of those around you. Kevin Vost reminds us, the calm of the Stoic is the beginning of virtue, not the end of it. This is why the Stoics considered perspective a moral tool. Once you truly understand your position in the universe, you begin to act with courage, fairness, and intelligence. You stop exhausting yourself with ego-driven battles and start investing your energy in things that leave a mark beyond your own lifetime. In the end, inner calm is just the doorway. The real reward is the freedom to act in alignment with your highest values, regardless of what the world throws at you. Most people will finish a video like this and go straight back to the same narrow perspective that has been limiting them for years. Don't let that happen to you. You now carry a mental tool that can completely change the way you experience every single day of your life. The view from above is not some abstract philosophical idea. It's a discipline. It's the decision to rise above the chaos, to stop reacting like a victim, and to look at your existence with the calm and poise of someone who understands where they truly stand in the universe. When you wake up tomorrow, don't automatically fall into old thought patterns. Take a deep breath, step outside of yourself, expand your field of vision in space and time. And remind yourself that no moment is ever as big as it initially feels. According to Marcus Aurelius, life is only what your thoughts make of it. If this message challenged the way you look at your life, leave a comment below telling me what part resonated most with you. That single comment may help someone else who is still trapped in their own mental maze. And if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the channel and share this content with someone who needs it, because the world doesn't need more noise, it needs more clarity. In our next video, we'll explore how one of the most mysterious philosophers in ancient Greece uncovered a forgotten truth, a truth that later became the foundation of Stoic thinking, and yet most people today still have no idea it exists. What he discovered has the power to completely reshape the way you understand change, suffering, and destiny, and you won't want to miss it. Never forget, the universe may be vast, but your ability to rise above your circumstances is even greater. See you in the next video.